When I got the alert from my bank that $80,000 had vanished from my account in a single transaction to Dubai, I never imagined the thief would share my last name, my blood, and the memories of 36 years raising him alone after an accident took his mother from me. Before we continue, subscribe to True Family Stories and hit the notification bell because we have new stories every day. Leave a like and tell us in the comments what city you are watching from. My name is Thomas Warren. I'm 64 years old, and for 40 of those years, I worked as an accountant at a respectable firm in Chicago. I learned from a young age that numbers never lie, that every penny has an origin and a destination, and that financial discipline is the backbone of a dignified life. After retiring 3 years ago, I continued to apply those principles with the same rigor. I reviewed my bank statements weekly, kept meticulous records of every expense, and guarded my savings with the prudence of someone who knows the true value of hard work. It was a Tuesday afternoon in April 2023 when my phone buzzed with a notification that made my blood run cold. The message from the bank was brief but devastating. Transaction complete, $80,000. Purpose Premium Dubai Tour Package. Mediterranean Luxury Travel Agency. My heart immediately started racing. I hadn't authorized that purchase. I hadn't even considered traveling anywhere in recent months. With trembling hands but a mind trained for crisis, I opened the banking app. The balance that should have shown my life savings from honest work now displayed a laughable figure, $2,362, $80,000. Gone. I felt the ground move beneath my feet. But 40 years of professional experience had taught me something crucial. Panic clouds judgment, and clear judgment is the only useful tool in a crisis. I took 3 deep breaths, closed my eyes, and forced my brain to switch from emotional mode to analytical mode. First question: when exactly did the transaction occur? I checked the details. Just 4 hours ago at 11 in the morning. Second question: what information would they need to execute an operation of that size? My account required 2-factor authentication for transfers over 5,000. A password, a verification code sent to my phone, and sometimes an in-person or video call verification for unusually large transactions. Then the thought I didn't want to face arrived, but one my experience forced me to consider. This wasn't a random hack from some faraway country. Whoever did this had access to very specific, very personal, very intimate information. They knew my full details, my behavior patterns, maybe even my passwords. The money itself wasn't what hurt the most. It was the creeping realization that the thief was likely someone I knew and trusted. I got up from the armchair where I had been reading minutes before, completely oblivious to the financial catastrophe brewing, and walked to my small study. There I kept a metal filing cabinet where I stored physical copies of all my important documents, deeds, contracts, insurance policies, and, crucially, records of everyone I had given personal information to in recent years. As I methodically went through each folder, my mind began to reconstruct a conversation I'd had 6 months earlier in October 2022. My son Nathan, my only child, the boy I raised alone since he was 8, after a drunk driver shattered my world and took my wife Patricia, had come to visit me one Sunday afternoon. I remember that day perfectly because Nathan rarely visited without a specific reason. We sat on the small terrace of my apartment. He drank the coffee I made for him, and then with a smile that seemed affectionate at the time, but which I now reinterpreted in a completely different light, he said, "Dad, Brenda and I are updating our life insurance policies, and we want to list you as a beneficiary in case anything happens to us. Could you give me a copy of your ID, your social security number, and your full bank details?" I, being the trusting and proud father I was, didn't hesitate for a second. I even felt flattered that my son was thinking of me that way. I photocopied every document he requested, including my bank card front and back, to verify the account number correctly as he explained. I handed him everything in a manila envelope, which he carefully placed in his leather briefcase. Now sitting in front of that filing cabinet with the bank notifications still glowing on my phone screen, that scene took on a completely different meaning. The pieces were starting to fit together in a way that made me physically nauseous. But I needed more than suspicion. I needed certainty. I picked up my phone and dialed the bank's customer service number. After navigating the automated maze of options, I finally got to speak to a human operator. I explained the situation with as much calm as I could muster, emphasizing that I had not authorized the transaction and needed immediate information. The operator, after verifying my identity through an exhaustive security protocol, confirmed that the transaction had been processed using all the correct authorization codes. "Mr. Warren," he said in a professional but slightly bewildered voice, "according to our records, the purchase was authorized using your personal password, the verification code sent to your registered phone number, and a video call confirmation made this morning at 10:45 a.m. "Impossible," I replied immediately. "I was at the grocery store at that time. I have the time-stamped receipt to prove it." There was a significant pause on the other end of the line. "Mr. Warren, we need you to come to your branch in person as soon as possible. This requires a formal investigation. I'm going to place a preventative block on your account and generate an incident report. Can you come in first thing tomorrow morning?" We scheduled an appointment for 900 a.m. the next day with the branch manager, James Peterson, who had handled my banking for years. After hanging up, I sat in silence for several minutes processing the magnitude of what I was facing. 80,000 was almost everything I had left after helping Nathan with the down payment on his apartment 5 years ago, after financing his wedding 7 years ago, after supporting him financially through his college years and his first unstable jobs. I had been a generous father, perhaps too generous, always prioritizing my son's needs over my own. And now, if my suspicions were correct, that same son had decided my generosity wasn't enough and had taken what I never would have denied him if he had simply asked me for it honestly. But I still couldn't afford the luxury of emotional certainty. I needed evidence. I spent the next 4 hours reviewing every bank record from the last 6 months, looking for patterns, as anomalies, any sign I might have missed. And then I found it. 3 small test transactions made 2 weeks ago each for less than 50 to a payment processor I didn't recognize. Small enough to fly under my radar during my weekly reviews, but now in retrospect, they were obvious trial runs to ensure the main heist would go smoothly. That night, I barely slept. The betrayal felt like a physical wound, a dull ache that spread from my chest throughout my entire body. The thought that my only son, whom I had raised with everything I had, could do this to me was almost unbearable. By dawn, I had come to a grim resolution. I would face this head-on with the same methodical approach I had applied to every challenge in my life. At 8:45 a.m., I arrived at the bank dressed in my best suit, a small armor of dignity for what was to come. James Peterson, a man in his early 50s, with whom I had built a relationship of mutual respect over the years, greeted me with genuine concern. His office was a testament to a successful banking career, tasteful, subdued, and meticulously organized. "Thomas, I've reviewed the case personally," James began after we sat down. "This is unlike any fraud situation I've seen in my 25 years in banking. The authentication was perfect. Your password, your phone number for the verification code, and most concerning of all, a video verification call that our system accepted as legitimate." "But I wasn't here," I said firmly. "I was at Morton's Grocery on Fifth Avenue. The receipt shows I was checking out at 10:47 a.m., 2 minutes after this supposed video call." James nodded, his expression grave. "That's what makes this case so unusual. Our security team has pulled the video call recording. I'd like to show it to you." He turned his computer monitor toward me and played a short clip. The quality wasn't perfect, but what I saw sent a chill down my spine. A man wearing sunglasses and a baseball cap, his face partially obscured, was speaking to the bank representative. The voice was distorted due to what seemed like a poor connection, but the answers given to the security questions were all correct. "Our systems flagged this as a potential risk due to the unusual nature of the transaction," James explained, "but the caller had all your personal information, correctly answered the security questions about your recent transactions and account history, and had access to your registered phone number for the verification code." So they just gave away my money based on this. I couldn't keep the anger from my voice. James sighed. "Thomas, banking security is always a balance between protection and accessibility. The truth is, with the right personal information determined, fraudsters can bypass most systems. What concerns me most is how they got access to your phone for the verification code." "My son, I said the words feeling like poison on my tongue. "Nathan has been to my house countless times. He knows where I keep my phone. He could have cloned it or forwarded messages somehow." That's a serious accusation, James said carefully. Do you have any evidence? Not yet, but who else could it be? Who else would have access to all my personal details and know my habits so thoroughly? James leaned forward, lowering his voice even though we were alone in his office. Thomas, I've seen cases involving sophisticated deepfake technology that can fool even our advanced facial recognition. It's rare, but it happens. Before you accuse a family member, you should consider all possibilities. Deepfake. The term sounded vaguely familiar from news reports. Advanced AI technology that can create convincing video of someone saying and doing things they never did, James explained. Our security team is investigating this angle. In the meantime, we've initiated the fraud claim process. It typically takes 10 business days to complete an investigation, but I must warn you, if the transaction was authenticated with all the proper credentials, recovering the funds could be challenging. I felt a heaviness settle in my chest. 10 days was a long time to wait when nearly every penny I had was gone. What am I supposed to do in the meantime? We can offer an emergency credit line based on your history with us, James suggested. And I would strongly advise filing a police report immediately. Whether or not it was your son, this is a serious financial crime. I nodded, but inside I was conflicted. Filing a police report would mean potentially setting in motion a criminal investigation against my own son. Despite my suspicions, despite the evidence pointing in his direction, taking that step felt like crossing a line from which there could be no return. I need time to think, I said finally, and I need to gather more evidence before I involve the police. James seemed to understand. That's your decision, Thomas, but don't wait too long. The trail gets colder by the day. As I left the bank, I felt a strange calm descend over me. The initial shock had faded, replaced by a steely determination to uncover the truth. If Nathan had betrayed me this way, I needed to be absolutely certain before taking action that would forever alter our relationship. Instead of going home, I drove to a small coffee shop on the other side of town, a place I knew Nathan would never frequent. I needed a neutral space to think and plan my next move. As I sipped my black coffee, I pulled out my phone and composed a text message to an old friend, Michael Reynolds. Michael and I had met 30 years ago when we both worked for the same accounting firm. He had later transitioned into digital forensics and security consulting before retiring 2 years before me. If anyone could help me navigate this situation discreetly, it was Michael. Need your help on a sensitive financial matter. Can we meet today? It's urgent. I kept it vague in case Nathan had somehow gained access to my phone. Michael's response came within minutes. My office, 2 p.m., rear entrance. For the first time since receiving that devastating bank alert, I felt a glimmer of hope. Michael's expertise might help me find the definitive evidence I needed, either to confirm my worst fears about Nathan or to discover that someone else was behind this betrayal. At precisely 2 p.m., I knocked on the back door of a modest office building in a commercial district. Michael himself opened the door. Though retired, he maintained a small office for occasional consulting work. Time had added more gray to his hair and deepened the lines around his eyes, but his handshake was as firm as ever. Thomas, it's been too long, he said warmly, leading me into a space filled with computer equipment that looked far more sophisticated than what you'd expect in a retiree's hobby room. Though I wish we were meeting under better circumstances, your message sounded serious. I spent the next 20 minutes explaining everything. The unauthorized transaction, the perfect authentication, my suspicions about Nathan, and my reluctance to go to the police without being absolutely certain. Michael listened without interruption, his expression growing increasingly troubled. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair and sighed deeply. You're right to be cautious about involving the police immediately, he said. Once that machinery starts moving, you can't easily stop it. But Thomas, everything you've told me points to someone with intimate knowledge of your life and finances. It could be Nathan, or it could be someone else close to you. Who else could it possibly be? I asked, the frustration evident in my voice. Let's not jump to conclusions, Michael cautioned. First, let's investigate this Mediterranean luxury travel agency. A legitimate business might have records that could help us identify who made the booking. He turned to his computer and began typing rapidly. After several minutes of focused searching, his expression changed. Well, that's interesting. Mediterranean Luxury Travel Agency was incorporated just 3 months ago. Their online presence is minimal. A basic website with stock photos and generic information. No real client testimonials, no detailed history. A shell company? I asked, familiar with the concept from my accounting days. Possibly. Let me dig deeper. Michael continued his digital excavation, occasionally mumbling to himself as he uncovered new information. The company is registered to Orion Thompson. Does that name mean anything to you? I shook my head. Never heard of him. Michael typed some more, then suddenly stopped, his eyes widening. Thomas, according to public records, Ryan Thompson is married to Sarah Thompson, née Miller. Any connection there? The revelation hit me like a physical blow. Sarah Miller is Brenda's sister. She's Nathan's sister-in-law. Michael's expression hardened. And Ryan Thompson is listed as the Chief Marketing Officer of Horizon Digital Solutions, the company where Nathan works in digital marketing. The connection was undeniable now. This wasn't some elaborate scam by unknown criminals. This was calculated theft by my own son, carefully disguised through a company connected to his brother-in-law. I felt physically ill. There's more, Michael said, quietly turning his monitor toward me. I found Nathan's Instagram account. He posted this 3 days ago. The photo showed Nathan's father-in-law, a portly man in his 60s, whom I had met at the wedding, lounging by a pool with the Dubai skyline clearly visible in the background. The caption read, "He deserves the luxury after everything he's done for our family. Hashtag Dubai life, #family first." I stared at the image, unable to speak. My money, the money I had worked honestly for 4 decades to earn, was being used to fund a lavish vacation for Nathan's father-in-law. The betrayal was complete, and worse, flaunted publicly for anyone to see. "I'm sorry, Thomas," Michael said softly. "I know this isn't what you wanted to find." "No," I agreed, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside me. "But it's what I needed to know. There are some betrayals that cannot be forgiven, even from your own flesh and blood." Michael leaned forward, his expression serious. "You need to decide what you want to do next. If you go to the police with this evidence, they will investigate and likely press charges. Nathan could face serious consequences, possibly even jail time. Is that what you want?" It was the question I had been avoiding since the moment I suspected Nathan's involvement. Did I want to see my only child, the boy I had raised alone after losing my wife, face criminal charges? The father in me recoiled at the thought, but another part of me, the part that had lived by principles of honesty and integrity for 64 years, knew that actions had consequences. "I need to speak with Nathan first," I said finally. "I need to hear from his own mouth why he did this." Michael nodded. "I understand, but be careful. If he realizes you're onto him, he might try to cover his tracks or create a convincing lie. Would you like me to come with you?" I considered the offer for a moment, then shook my head. "No, this is between father and son. But I would appreciate it if you could compile all this evidence in case I need it later." "Of course," Michael agreed. "And Thomas, whatever happens, remember that Nathan's actions reflect on him, not on you. You've been a good father." I left Michael's office with a heavy heart but a clear purpose. The next morning, I would drive to Nathan's home and confront him with what I knew. I would look into my son's eyes and give him one chance to tell me the truth and explain his betrayal. That night, alone in my apartment, I looked at old photographs of Nathan. Pictures of a smiling 8-year-old boy, still grieving his mother but trying to be brave. A teenager receiving academic awards that made me swell with pride. A college graduate with his whole future ahead of him. A handsome groom with Brenda by his side, beginning what I had hoped would be a life built on the values I had tried to instill in him. Where had I gone wrong? Had I been too generous, too quick to solve his problems with money, rather than allowing him to develop resilience through struggle? Or had the loss of his mother at such a formative age created a void that no amount of fatherly love could fill? Questions without answers swirled in my mind as I finally drifted into a troubled sleep. The next morning, I dressed carefully, not in a suit this time, but in casual clothes. A subtle reminder to Nathan that I was coming as his father, not as an accuser. I drove the 30 minutes to his upscale neighborhood in silence, rehearsing what I would say, how I would give him the opportunity to confess before revealing what I knew. Nathan's house was a tasteful 2-story home in a gated community purchased 5 years ago with my substantial help for the down payment. As I parked in the driveway, I noticed both his car and Brenda's were present. Good, they were home. I rang the doorbell, my heart pounding in my chest. After a moment, the door opened and Nathan stood there, surprise evident on his face. Dad, this is unexpected. Is everything okay? I studied my son's face, the face I had known and loved for 36 years. Did I see guilt there, concern, or just surprise at an unannounced visit? We need to talk, Nathan. May I come in? Something in my tone must have alerted him that this wasn't a casual visit. A flicker of, was it worry, crossed his features before he stepped aside. Of course. Come in. Brenda's just in the kitchen. Would you like some coffee? No, thank you, I said, stepping into their immaculately decorated living room. The space spoke of prosperity. Designer furniture, expensive art on the walls, a large television that must have cost thousands. How much of this lifestyle had been funded by my generosity, and now, apparently by outright theft? Brenda emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a towel. Thomas, what a lovely surprise. Are you staying for lunch? This isn't a social visit, I said, my voice calmer than I felt. Nathan, I need to speak with you about an important financial matter. Nathan and Brenda exchanged a quick glance that confirmed my suspicions more clearly than any evidence Michael had uncovered. They knew exactly why I was here. Brenda, could you give us a moment, please? Nathan asked, his voice strained. Actually, I interjected. Since this concerns $80,000 that disappeared from my account and a luxury trip to Dubai for your father, Brenda, I think you should stay. The color drained from both their faces. Brenda sank into a chair while Nathan remained standing, his posture suddenly defensive. Dad, I can explain, he began. Please do, I interrupted, my voice still steady. Explain why you stole my life savings without even asking me. Explain why you're sending your father-in-law to Dubai with my money. Explain why my own son would betray me like this. The confrontation that followed was one of the most painful experiences of my life. Nathan's initial denials quickly crumbled under the weight of the evidence I presented. His justifications revealed a mindset so alien to my own values that I wondered if I had ever truly known my son. It's not stealing when it's family, he insisted, his voice rising defensively. You have all this money just sitting there and you never use it. You live like you're still struggling. Meanwhile, Brenda's dad has done so much for us and we wanted to do something special for him. So you took my money without asking. The calm I had maintained began to crack. You didn't steal from some faceless corporation, Nathan. You stole from me, your father who has supported you your entire life. I was going to pay it back, Nathan claimed, though his eyes couldn't meet mine. It was just a loan. A loan is something you ask for and the other person agrees to. What you did wasn't borrowing her. It was theft, plain and simple. Brenda, who had been quiet until now, suddenly spoke up. Thomas, please understand, we've been under tremendous pressure. Our social circle, our position in the community, there are expectations. Ryan and Sarah helped us get connected with the right people, but that meant keeping up appearances. Nathan's father can't afford trips like this, but mine has done so much for us. I cut her off, a new realization dawning. Is that what this is about? Appearances, impressing people with money you don't have? Nathan's expression confirmed my suspicion. My son, whom I had raised to value substance over show, integrity over impression, had become someone who would steal from his own father to maintain a facade of wealth. You haven't just stolen my money, Nathan, I said, my voice now heavy with emotion. You've stolen the trust I placed in you for 36 years. The silence that followed was deafening. Nathan stared at the floor while Brenda dabbed at tears that seemed more about being caught than genuine remorse. Finally, Nathan looked up. What are you going to do? It was the question I had been wrestling with since discovering his betrayal. What would I do? Report my own son to the police, cut him from my life, forgive an unforgivable breach of trust? I haven't decided yet, I answered truthfully, but I want you to understand the gravity of what you've done. This isn't just about money, it's about character. It's about the values I thought I had taught you. We can pay you back, Brenda offered quickly. Not all at once, but in installments. Ryan's company is doing really well and Nathan's up for a promotion. This isn't about the money. My voice rose for the first time. This is about the fact that my son, whom I raised alone after his mother died, whom I supported through every stage of his life, thought it was acceptable to steal from me rather than simply ask for help. Nathan flinched at my words, a flash of shame crossing his face. Dad, I'm sorry. I know it was wrong. I didn't think you'd understand about needing to do this for Brenda's family. You've always been so practical about money. Practical, I helped you buy this house. I paid for your wedding. I supported you when your first job didn't work out. When have I ever not been generous with you? Nathan had no answer for that. The truth was, he had never tested the limits of my generosity by simply asking for something this extravagant. He had assumed rejection and moved straight to deception. I stood up suddenly, feeling every one of my 64 years. I'm going now. I need time to think about what happens next. Dad, wait, Nathan said, panic edging into his voice. You're not going to the police, are you? This would destroy my career, my reputation. I looked at my son, really looked at him, and saw something that broke my heart. He was more worried about the consequences to his image than about the damage he had done to our relationship. In that moment, I knew what I had to do, even though every fatherly instinct screamed against it. True love sometimes means allowing people to face the consequences of their actions. I said quietly, I raised you better than this, Nathan. And if you've forgotten those lessons, perhaps it's time you learn them again, the hard way. As I walked out of the house that had been purchased with my help, I felt no satisfaction, no righteous anger, only a profound sadness that the child I had raised with so much love could betray that love so completely. But I also felt a conviction growing within me. This was a defining moment, not just for Nathan, but for me as a father. Sometimes the most loving thing a parent can do is to let their child face the full consequences of their actions. It would be painful for both of us. But perhaps it was the only way Nathan would ever understand the true value of integrity. And so with a heavy heart but clear purpose, I drove directly to the police station to file a report. Because true love isn't about protecting someone from consequences. It's about caring enough to let them experience the hard lessons they need to grow. I spent the night at a small motel on the outskirts of Chicago, unable to face the emptiness of my apartment after filing the police report. Sleep came in fitful bursts, interrupted by dreams of Nathan as a child calling for me after nightmares, trusting me completely to keep him safe. The irony wasn't lost on me. Now, I was the source of the nightmare that would soon engulf him. By morning, my phone had accumulated 17 missed calls and 23 text messages, all from Nathan and Brenda. I read through them without responding. The progression was telling, from confused, Dad, what's going on? Call me, to panicked, the police just called. Please call me back. To desperate, Dad, you can't do this to us. We're family. The last message, sent at 3:42 a.m., simply read, How could you? The question hung in my mind as I showered and dressed. How could I report my own son to the police? But the real question, the one Nathan needed to face, was how could he have betrayed my trust so completely? Detective Sarah Gonzalez called me at precisely 9 a.m., just as she had promised it when I filed the report yesterday. Mr. Warren, we've contacted your son regarding the allegations. He claims this is all a misunderstanding, that he had your verbal permission to use the funds for his father-in-law's trip. Is there any truth to that claim? Absolutely not, I replied firmly. I never gave any such permission. In fact, I was completely unaware of the transaction until I received the bank notification. There was a pause on the line. I understand this must be difficult for you, Mr. Warren. Family fraud cases often are. If you wish to withdraw the complaint, I interrupted, my resolve strengthening. What my son did was wrong. He needs to understand that actions have consequences. Very well. We'll need you to come in later today to sign some additional paperwork and provide a formal statement. Would 2 p.m. work for you? I agreed and ended the call, feeling the weight of my decision settle more firmly on my shoulders. This was really happening. I was pursuing criminal charges against my only child. My phone rang again almost immediately. It was Michael. Thomas, I've been trying to reach you. Nathan just called me. That was surprising. Nathan had only met Michael a handful of times over the years. What did he want? He wanted me to convince you to drop the charges. He seems to know about our meeting yesterday and thinks I might have some influence over you. He was desperate. What did you tell him? Michael sighed. I told him I wasn't getting involved, that this was between you and him. But Thomas, he mentioned something troubling. He said if this goes forward, it won't just be his reputation that suffers. He implied he has information that could embarrass you. A chill ran through me. He's bluffing. I have nothing to hide. I believe you, but desperate people make desperate choices. Are you prepared for this to get ugly? Was I had always lived a life of quiet integrity. There were no skeletons in my closet, no scandals waiting to be exposed. But Nathan knew intimate details of my life. Perhaps he could twist something innocent into something shameful. The thought of my son using my private life as leverage made me physically ill. It doesn't matter, I said finally. This isn't about me. It's about teaching Nathan that integrity isn't negotiable. I respect that, Michael replied. Just be careful. And Thomas, you're doing the right thing, even though it's the hardest thing. After we hung up, I drove to my apartment to collect some clothes and personal items. I had decided to stay at the motel for a few more days at least, until the initial storm passed. As I packed a small suitcase, I heard a key in the lock. Nathan still had a key to my apartment, a fact I had forgotten until this moment. I steeled myself for the confrontation, part of me dreading it, another part almost relieved that it was happening. The door opened, and there stood Nathan and Brenda. Nathan looked terrible, eyes bloodshot from lack of sleep, hair uncombed, wearing the same clothes I had seen him in yesterday. Brenda, by contrast, was impeccably groomed as always, though her expression was a careful mask of concern. "Dad," Nathan said, his voice cracking, "we need to talk." I gestured to the living room. "Say what you came to say." They entered cautiously, as if my apartment had suddenly become hostile territory. Brenda sat on the edge of the couch while Nathan remained standing, hands shoved into his pockets. "I can't believe you went to the police," Nathan began, anger and hurt competing in his voice. "Do you have any idea what this will do to me, to my career, to our lives?" "I considered that very carefully before I made my decision," I replied calmly. "But I think the real question is, did you consider what your actions would do to me, to our relationship, to the trust I placed in you?" "It wasn't theft." Nathan's voice rose sharply. "I was going to pay you back. It was just a loan." "A loan requires consent, Nathan. You took my life savings without asking. You used my personal information to impersonate me. You created a fraudulent video to deceive the bank. Those aren't the actions of someone borrowing money." Brenda leaned forward, her voice soft and persuasive. "Thomas, please understand our position. Nathan's promotion depends on maintaining certain connections. My father has been instrumental in introducing us to the right people. We needed to show our appreciation. With my money," I added flatly. "We would have asked," Brenda continued, "but you're so frugal. We didn't think you'd understand the importance of these social obligations. So you decided theft was the answer." I shook my head in disbelief. "And that justifies taking 80,000 without permission." Nathan ran a hand through his disheveled hair. "Dad, please, drop the charges. We'll pay you back every penny. We'll set up a payment plan with interest, whatever you want. What I want is for my son to understand that integrity isn't something you demonstrate when it's convenient, but what you maintain, especially when it's difficult." "Integrity," Nathan's expression darkened. "You want to talk about integrity? You've lived your entire life in the same apartment, wearing the same kinds of clothes, eating the same budget meals. What has all that integrity gotten you? Meanwhile, I'm building something. Connections, a reputation, a future. Yes, I took a shortcut. Yes, it was wrong. But I was trying to build something meaningful for my family." "By stealing from your family?" I asked quietly. Something shifted in Nathan's eyes then, a realization perhaps of the fundamental contradiction in his argument. But instead of acknowledging it, he doubled down. "I made a mistake, but turning me into the police isn't the answer. We're family. Families handle these things privately. When did you plan to tell me about this loan you took, before or after your father-in-law's trip to Dubai?" Nathan looked away, the answer clear in his silence. Brenda stood up suddenly, her composure cracking for the first time. "Thomas, be reasonable. If this becomes public, it won't just affect Nathan. It will affect me, my career in real estate, my standing in the community. We have a mortgage on this house. We have car payments. Our entire life could collapse." "Perhaps you shouldn't have built that life on appearances you couldn't afford," I suggested gently. Her eyes flashed with sudden anger. "That's easy for you to say. You've never cared what anyone thought of you. But some of us have to live in the real world where connections and impressions matter. The real world also includes consequences for illegal actions, I replied. Nathan moved to stand beside his wife, placing a hand on her shoulder. The gesture struck me as oddly performative, like so much else in their lives. Dad, he said, his tone shifting to one I recognized from his childhood, the voice he used when trying to wheedle an extra dessert or a later bedtime. What if we came to an arrangement? We'll sign a formal agreement to repay the money in installments. Brenda's parents could help. Her father feels terrible about this whole situation. He had no idea the trip wasn't a legitimate gift. He's willing to contribute to making this right. I studied my son's face, searching for genuine remorse rather than regret at being caught. When did your father-in-law find out about the source of his luxury vacation? Nathan and Brenda exchanged a quick glance that told me everything. He doesn't know, does he? He still believes it was a gift from his successful son-in-law. It would devastate him to learn the truth, Brenda admitted. He's so proud of what he thinks we've accomplished. I shook my head, a new layer of disappointment settling over me. So the deception extends beyond me. You're living a lie on multiple fronts. We're trying to make things right, Nathan insisted. Please just drop the charges and let us handle this as a family. I looked at my son, really looked at him, and saw not the man I had raised him to be, but the man he had chosen to become. Someone who valued appearances over substance, who would betray trust for temporary gain, who would lie to those closest to him to maintain a facade. I can't do that, Nathan. This isn't just about the money. It's about choices and consequences. It's about the kind of man I raised you to be versus the man standing before me now. Nathan's expression hardened, the conciliatory tone vanishing instantly. Fine, if that's how you want it, remember you forced my hand. What does that mean? I asked, though I already suspected. It means if you continue with this, I'll have to defend myself by any means necessary. There are things about you, about Mom, about our family that you might not want made public. The threat hung in the air between us. I felt a surge of anger unlike anything I had experienced before, not at the implied threat to my reputation, but at the confirmation that my son would stoop to blackmail to avoid responsibility. Get out, I said quietly. Dad, get out of my home. Now. They left without another word, the door closing with a soft click that somehow felt more final than a slam would have. I sat down heavily on my couch, the full weight of what had just transpired settling over me. My son had not only stolen from me, but had now threatened me. The chasm between us seemed unbridgeable. My phone rang, startling me from my thoughts. It was Detective Gonzalez. Mr. Warren, I wanted to inform you that your son and his wife just left the station. They came in voluntarily to give their statement. What did they say? I asked, though I could guess. They're claiming that this was an authorized loan, that you had given verbal permission for the transaction. They say you've had memory issues recently and might have forgotten the conversation. Memory issues. So that was their angle. Paint me as a confused old man who couldn't remember giving permission. It was clever, I had to admit. At 64, I was just old enough for such claims to seem plausible to those who didn't know me well. That's completely false, I stated firmly. I have no memory issues. My son is lying to avoid responsibility. We expected as much, the detective replied. However, I should warn you that these types of cases can be difficult to prosecute when they involve family members. Your son provided evidence that he has had access to your finances in the past, including paying bills on your behalf and managing some investments. That was true. During a brief illness 2 years ago, I had authorized Nathan to handle some financial matters for me. I had trusted him completely then. That was a temporary arrangement during my recovery from pneumonia, I explained. I never authorized him to withdraw $80,000 for a luxury vacation. I understand, Mr. Warren. We're proceeding with the investigation. However, I want you to be prepared. Cases like these often turn into he said situations. The fact that your son used sophisticated methods to impersonate you for the video verification is our strongest evidence of criminal intent. After ending the call, I finished packing my suitcase with a renewed sense of purpose. Nathan had shown his true colors, not just in stealing the money, but in his response to being caught. Instead of genuine remorse, he had offered threats and lies. The path forward was difficult but clear. I kept our appointment at the police station that afternoon, providing a detailed statement and signing all the necessary paperwork. Detective Gonzalez was professional and sympathetic, but realistic about what lay ahead. Financial fraud cases involving family members are complicated, Mr. Warren. There will be a preliminary hearing within the next few weeks to determine if there's sufficient evidence to proceed to trial. Your son has already retained a lawyer, a good one. You might want to consider having legal representation as well, at least for consultation. I nodded, the reality of the situation becoming increasingly concrete. I'll look into that. Thank you for your honesty. As I left the station, my phone buzzed with a text from Michael. Free for dinner, we should talk. We met at a quiet Italian restaurant far from both our usual neighborhoods. Michael was already seated when I arrived, a glass of red wine in front of him and another waiting for me. I took the liberty, he said, gesturing to the wine. Thought you might need it. Thanks. I took a sip, grateful for the warmth that spread through my chest. It's been a day. Michael leaned forward. Thomas, I've been doing some additional digging. There's something you should know about Nathan's finances. What did you find? This isn't the first time he's taken money without permission. I found evidence that he's been skimming from the marketing budget at his company. Small amounts carefully concealed, but adding up to nearly $30,000 over the past year. I felt my stomach drop. Are you certain? Michael nodded grimly. The pattern is clear once you know what to look for. He's been authorizing payments to shell companies for consulting services that were never rendered. One of these companies is registered to Ryan Thompson, the same brother-in-law connected to the Dubai trip. Does his company know? Not yet. But financial audits have ways of uncovering these things eventually. Thomas, I think what happened with your money might be part of a larger pattern of behavior. I sat back, the implications washing over me. This wasn't a one-time lapse in judgment. Nathan had been systematically deceiving multiple parties for his own benefit. The son I thought I knew was a stranger to me. There's more, Michael continued reluctantly. I found their social media accounts. Nathan's, Brenda's, her sister Sarah's. They've been living way beyond their means for years. Designer clothes, expensive restaurants, luxury vacations. Based on Nathan's salary and Brenda's commission-based income as a realtor, there's no way they could afford this lifestyle. So they've been stealing from others too, I said quietly, or accumulating massive debt, or both. I suspect the pressure to maintain this facade is what led Nathan to take such a risk with your money. I rubbed my forehead, feeling a headache building. What should I do with this information? Michael considered for a moment. That depends on what outcome you want. If your goal is to teach Nathan a lesson, providing this evidence to the police would strengthen their case against him. But it would also likely result in him losing his job and facing additional charges. And if I don't share it, then you're potentially allowing him to continue this behavior with other victims. The weight of the decision pressed down on me. I had always taught Nathan that integrity meant doing the right thing even when it was difficult, even when no one was watching. Now I was faced with a test of my own principles. I need to think about this, I said finally. Michael nodded. Of course, but think quickly. The preliminary hearing will be scheduled soon. When I returned to my motel room that night, I found an email from Brenda waiting in my inbox. The subject line read simply, "Please read important." I opened it with trepidation. The message was brief but unexpected. Thomas, I want to meet with you privately, without Nathan. There are things you need to know. Tomorrow, 10 a.m. at Riverside Park near the old boathouse. Please come alone, Brenda. I stared at the message, trying to decipher its meaning. Was this a genuine attempt to share information or another manipulation? Brenda had always struck me as the more practical of the two, the one who might recognize when a situation had become untenable. But she had also been complicit in Nathan's deception. After some consideration, I replied with a simple, "I'll be there," then called Michael to inform him of the meeting. Be careful, he cautioned. Don't agree to anything without consulting me first. And meet in the open, not somewhere private. The park is public enough, I assured him. I'll call you immediately afterward. I arrived at Riverside Park 15 minutes early the next morning, choosing a bench with clear sight lines in all directions. The spring day was mild, the park relatively empty on a weekday morning. At precisely 10 a.m., I saw Brenda approaching alone as promised. She looked different from our confrontation in my apartment. More subdued, her usual polished appearance slightly dimmed. She wore minimal makeup, and her clothing was casual rather than the designer outfits she typically favored. "Thank you for coming," she said, sitting beside me on the bench and leaving a respectful distance between us. "You said there were things I needed to know," I replied, keeping my tone neutral. Brenda took a deep breath, then looked directly at me. "First, I want to say that I'm sorry. What we did was wrong. I knew it was wrong when we did it, and I still went along with it." The apology seemed genuine, which only made me more cautious. "Why are you telling me this now? Why not when you and Nathan came to my apartment?" She looked down at her hands. "Nathan doesn't know I'm here. He still thinks we can fight this, that we can convince a judge that you authorized the transaction. He's—" She hesitated. "He's not thinking clearly. And you are." "I'm trying to. That's why I wanted to talk to you privately." She straightened her shoulders. "You should know that this wasn't the first time Nathan has taken money without authorization. So Michael's information was correct." "Go on." "There have been incidents at work, small amounts from project budgets, expenses, claimed for meetings that never happened. I looked the other way because he always had a good explanation. But after what happened with you, I started looking more closely at our finances." She pulled a folder from her bag and handed it to me. "These are bank statements, credit card bills, loan documents. We're 127,000 in debt, not counting the mortgage. Nathan's been opening new credit cards just to pay the minimums on the old ones." I flipped through the documents, each page revealing a more complete picture of financial disaster. Credit cards maxed out personal loans with exorbitant interest rates, cash advances, payday loans. It was a house of cards on the verge of collapse. "Why are you showing me this?" Brenda's composed facade cracked slightly. "Because I'm scared, Thomas. This can't continue. The Dubai trip for my father, that was Nathan's idea of a grand gesture to impress my family. My father had no idea it wasn't legitimate. He's a high school teacher who's never been able to afford that kind of luxury." The information matched what Michael had discovered, lending credibility to Brenda's account. "Nathan convinced himself that taking your money wasn't really stealing because you're family," she continued. "He said you had more than you needed, that you'd never even notice it was gone. He told himself it was temporary, that we'd pay it back once his promotion came through." "And you believed that?" She shook her head sadly. "I wanted to, but deep down I knew better. I should have stopped him, but I didn't. That makes me just as guilty." "What do you want from me, Brenda?" "I want to make this right as much as possible. I've spoken to my parents. They were horrified when I told them the truth. My father is cutting his trip short and returning the unused portion of the package. It's about 35,000 of the original amount. My parents are taking out a loan against their house to cover another 25,000. That still leaves 20,000 unaccounted for. I know, I've put our house on the market. It should sell quickly. The neighborhood is desirable. We won't get what we paid for it, but it should be enough to cover the remaining amount owed to you and make a dent in our other debts." I studied her carefully. "Does Nathan know you're doing this?" "He knows about my parents' contribution. He doesn't know about the house yet. He still thinks we can fight the charges and maintain our lifestyle." She looked away. "He's not the man I thought I married. Or maybe he was, and I just didn't want to see it." The admission hung in the air between us, raw and painful. I felt a surprising surge of compassion for Brenda. She had been complicit, yes, but she was also taking steps toward accountability that Nathan seemed incapable of. "What are you asking of me?" Brenda met my gaze directly. "If we return the money, all of it, would you consider dropping the charges? Not for Nathan's sake, but for the sake of everyone else involved. My father is devastated that his trip was funded by stolen money. My mother is heartbroken. They don't deserve to be dragged into a public court case." It was a reasonable request, one that appealed to my desire to avoid causing collateral damage to innocent parties. But something still bothered me. If I drop the charges, what stops Nathan from doing this again to someone else? What has he actually learned? Brenda's expression tightened. "I can't promise he'll learn the right lesson from this, but I can tell you that I've already consulted a divorce attorney. Once this situation is resolved, I'm leaving. I can't stay with someone I don't trust." The revelation surprised me. Brenda had always seemed the perfect corporate wife, fully invested in the image they projected as a power couple. Her willingness to walk away suggested a depth of character I hadn't recognized before. "I need time to think about this," I said finally, "and I'd need something in writing, a formal agreement about the repayment." "Of course. My parents' attorney has already drafted something." She pulled another document from her folder and handed it to me. "Take as much time as you need to review it. All the contact information is there if you have questions." As she stood to leave, I was struck by a question. "Brenda, why did you go along with it? You must have known it was wrong." She paused, considering her answer carefully. "I grew up watching my parents struggle. My father worked 2 jobs. My mother cleaned houses on weekends, and they still barely made ends meet. I promised myself I'd never live that way. When I met Nathan, he seemed so confident, so certain about the future he was building. I wanted to believe in that future so badly that I ignored the warning signs. By the time I realized the foundation was rotten, I was already complicit." She shook her head sadly. "It's not an excuse, just the truth." With that, she walked away, leaving me with a folder full of documents and difficult decisions to make. I spent the afternoon reviewing the proposed agreement with Michael, who recommended having my own attorney look it over. By evening, I had engaged the services of Eleanor Simmons, a straightforward lawyer specializing in financial disputes, who promised to review everything by the following day. When she called the next afternoon, her assessment was direct. "The offer is solid, Mr. Warren. The repayment schedule is reasonable with appropriate guarantees and consequences for default. From a purely financial perspective, you'd likely recover more through this agreement than through the criminal justice system, which focuses on punishment rather than restitution." "And from a non-financial perspective?" I asked. "That's outside my purview," she admitted. "But I understand the question. Whether your son learns a lesson from criminal prosecution that he wouldn't learn from civil consequences is a philosophical matter, not a legal one." The philosophical matter was precisely what kept me awake that night. What was my goal here? To punish Nathan, to recover my money, to teach him a lesson about integrity that had somehow failed to take root during his upbringing? By morning, I had made my decision. I called Detective Gonzalez to discuss my options, then contacted Eleanor to finalize the agreement with additional provisions I wanted included. Finally, I called Brenda. "I've reviewed the agreement," I told her. "I'm willing to drop the criminal charges under certain conditions beyond what's already outlined in the document." "What conditions?" she asked cautiously. "First, Nathan must enroll in a financial counseling program, a real one with regular sessions and accountability. Second, he must perform 200 hours of community service at a financial fraud victim support organization. Third, and most importantly, he must make a full confession to me, to your parents, and to his employer about the funds he's misappropriated from the company." There was silence on the other end of the line. "The first 2 conditions I think he'd accept," Brenda said finally. "The third, that would likely cost him his job." "Yes, it would, but continuing to hide that theft makes him no better than he was when he stole from me. True accountability isn't selective. Can I have some time to discuss this with him?" "Take 24 hours, I said, "but understand that if he refuses, I'll proceed with the criminal charges and provide evidence of his company theft to the prosecutors. The choice is his: complete accountability or complete consequences." I hung up feeling neither satisfaction nor regret, only a weary determination to see this through to its conclusion, whatever that might be. The next day, as the 24-hour deadline approached, I received a text from Nathan, the first direct communication from him since our confrontation in my apartment. "Can we meet, just you and me? No lawyers, no Brenda, just father and son." I agreed to meet at a coffee shop near the police station, a public place where neither of us would be likely to lose control. When I arrived, Nathan was already there, sitting at a corner table with 2 cups of coffee, one black the way I always drink it. He looked different, humbled in a way I hadn't seen before. The expensive watch and designer shirt were gone, replaced by a simple button-down and jeans. His usual confident posture had given way to something more contained. "Thank you for coming," he said as I sat down. "And thank you for the coffee," I replied, taking a sip. "Brenda told you my conditions." He nodded, looking down at his own untouched cup. "She did. I've spent the last 24 hours thinking about them. About everything." And Balaam, Nathan took a deep breath. "I'll do it. All of it. The counseling, the community service, and he hesitated. The confession to my company. I've already told Brenda's parents everything. It was, it was the hardest conversation I've ever had. Harder than this one, I asked quietly. A flash of painful recognition crossed his face. No, nothing is harder than sitting across from your father and admitting that you betrayed his trust completely. Why did you do it, Nathan, really? Not the justifications you told yourself, but the real reason. He was silent for a long moment, seemingly wrestling with something internal. I've been asking myself that same question. The easy answer is greed or entitlement. But I think the truth is fear. Fear of what? Fear of not being enough, not successful enough, not wealthy enough, not impressive enough. I've spent my entire adult life trying to project an image of success that I never actually achieved. Every promotion, every social connection became proof that I was worthy. And maintaining that image became more important than how I achieved it. He looked up, meeting my eyes directly for the first time. I became someone I know you didn't raise me to be. The admission hung in the air between us, more meaningful than any apology. I saw in my son's eyes something I hadn't seen during our previous confrontation: genuine remorse, not just regret at being caught. The court agreement, he continued, I've signed it. All the provisions, including the ones you added. I know it doesn't undo what I did, but I want you to know I'm committed to making amends, not just to you, but to everyone I've deceived. What about your job? I asked. You understand that confessing to your employer will almost certainly end your career there. Nathan nodded. I know. I've already scheduled a meeting with the CFO for tomorrow morning. I don't expect leniency, and frankly, I don't deserve it. I'll face whatever consequences come. And Brenda? A flash of pain crossed his face. She's leaving me once this is settled. I don't blame her. Trust once broken is nearly impossible to rebuild. He looked at me pointedly. I hope that's not universally true. I considered his words carefully. Trust can be rebuilt, Nathan, but not quickly and not easily. It requires consistent actions over time, not just words in a moment of crisis. I understand, he said quietly. I don't expect forgiveness right now. I know I haven't earned it, but I hope someday. He left the thought unfinished, the hope hanging in the air between us. As I looked at my son, truly looked at him, I saw something beyond the betrayal and the lies. I saw someone standing at a crossroads, a moment that would define the man he would become. The choices he made now, in the face of complete accountability, would reveal his true character more than any words could. The path forward isn't easy, I told him. Real change never is. But if you're genuinely committed to this process, not just to avoid prosecution, but because you want to become a better man, then there's hope. Nathan nodded, a single tear escaping despite his obvious effort to maintain composure. That's all I can ask for right now. A chance to prove through actions, not words, that I can be the son you raised me to be. The preliminary hearing was scheduled for the following week. When we arrived at the courthouse, Nathan, Brenda, their attorney, and I met with the prosecutor and Detective Gonzalez in a conference room. The formal agreement was presented, reviewed, and accepted. The charges would be held in abeyance pending completion of all terms: full financial restitution, counseling, community service, and a clean record for the next 3 years. As we prepared to leave the courthouse, Nathan approached me one last time. Dad, he said hesitantly, I know we have a long road ahead, but I want you to know I'm grateful for this chance. Many fathers would have walked away completely. You didn't, even when I gave you every reason to. I placed a hand on his shoulder, the first physical contact between us since before the theft. Sometimes true love means allowing the people we care about to face the consequences of their actions, but it also means being there as they find their way back. Nathan nodded, understanding the dual nature of the lesson. As he walked away with Brenda to meet with their attorney, I felt neither triumph nor defeat, only the quiet certainty that this painful chapter, however difficult, had been necessary. Sometimes the hardest lessons are the ones we need most desperately to learn. And sometimes the most profound act of love a father can offer is the gift of accountability, painful in the moment, but ultimately the foundation upon which a stronger character can be built. 3 months passed before I returned to my apartment permanently. The temporary distance had been necessary, a buffer between the crisis and whatever would come next. During that time, I had thrown myself into work at a local community center, volunteering to help seniors navigate financial matters. The irony wasn't lost on me. My professional expertise in fraud detection had failed to protect me from my own son's deception. Michael had become a constant presence in my life, checking in regularly, inviting me to dinner, even convincing me to join his weekly golf game despite my mediocre swing. His friendship was an unexpected blessing in the aftermath of family betrayal. "You seem better," he observed one evening as we sat on his deck watching the sunset over Lake Michigan. "There's a calmness about you that wasn't there before." "I've made peace with my decision," I said, "not because it was easy, but because it was right." Michael nodded thoughtfully. "Have you heard from Nathan?" "Not directly. His counselor sends monthly progress reports as required by the agreement. According to the latest one, he's been consistent with his sessions and has started his community service at the Fraud Victims Association. And his job situation." I sipped my iced tea, remembering the aftermath of Nathan's confession to his employer. He lost his position at Horizon Digital as expected. The company chose not to press charges in exchange for full restitution of the misappropriated funds. He's working at a warehouse now. Logistics management. A significant step down in prestige and pay. How do you feel about that? It was a complex question. Part of me, the father who had always wanted to protect my son from hardship, ached at the thought of Nathan's fall from grace. But another part, the man who valued integrity above all, recognized the necessity of these consequences. "I think it's what he needs right now," I said finally. "Nathan has spent his entire adult life focused on appearances, on impressing others. Working a job that's honest but unglamorous might teach him what really matters." Michael studied me for a moment. "You know, Thomas, many fathers in your position would have either enabled their child's behavior or cut them off completely. You found a third path, accountability with the possibility of redemption. That takes wisdom." His words warmed something in me that had been cold for months. I don't know about wisdom. I just know I couldn't live with myself if I did nothing and allowed the pattern to continue. As I drove home that evening, I reflected on how much had changed in a relatively short time. The financial wound was healing. Brenda's parents had contributed their portion as promised, and the sale of Nathan and Brenda's house had covered the remainder of what was owed to me. But the emotional damage would take longer to repair if it ever could be fully mended. When I arrived at my apartment building, Mrs. Patterson, my elderly neighbor from across the hall, was struggling with several grocery bags at the entrance. "Here, let me help you with those," I offered, taking the heaviest bags from her hands. "Oh, Thomas, you're a lifesaver," she sighed gratefully. "These old hands don't grip like they used to." As we rode the elevator to our floor, she chatted about her grandchildren's recent visit. There was something comforting in the mundane conversation, the simple human connection that asked nothing of me except presence. "By the way," she said as we reached her door, "someone left an envelope for you. I found it slipped under my door by mistake this morning. I was going to bring it over later." She retrieved a plain white envelope from her entry table and handed it to me. My name was written on the front in handwriting I immediately recognized as Nathan's. "Thank you," I said, trying to mask the sudden acceleration of my heartbeat. After helping Mrs. Patterson put away her groceries and declining her offer of fresh-baked cookies, I returned to my own apartment. I sat at my kitchen table, turning the envelope over in my hands several times before finally opening it. Inside was a single sheet of paper, a handwritten letter not typed or printed. "Dad, I know we're not supposed to have direct contact yet per the agreement, but I needed to write this. I've been in counseling for 3 months now, and my therapist suggested writing letters as a way to process my thoughts even if they're never sent. I've written you a dozen letters that remain unsent, but this one felt important to share. I want you to know that I'm beginning to understand the depth of what I did. Not just the theft itself, but the violation of trust that it represented. The counseling sessions have forced me to confront aspects of myself that I've spent years avoiding. My need for external validation, my willingness to compromise integrity for appearances, my habit of blaming others for my own choices. The job at the warehouse is humbling in ways I needed but resisted for so long. For the first time in my adult life, I'm working alongside people who live with real economic constraints, who have no family safety nets, who have learned resilience through necessity. They've taught me more about dignity in 3 months than I learned in years of chasing status. My community service at the Fraud Victims Association has been unexpectedly meaningful. Last week, an elderly woman came in. She'd lost her life savings to a scam similar to what I did to you. Seeing her tears as she described how she now depends completely on her children to survive showed me what I could have potentially done to you if you hadn't had the resources to recover. I don't expect forgiveness, and I'm not writing to ask for it. I'm writing because I want you to know that your difficult choice, holding me accountable instead of protecting me from consequences, was the right one. It would have been easier for both of us if you had looked the other way, but it wouldn't have been the wake-up call I so desperately needed. Thank you for loving me enough to let me face the consequences of my actions. Nathan. I read the letter 3 times, searching for signs of manipulation or calculation, the hallmarks of the person Nathan had become in recent years. But something about the simple handwriting, the crossed-out words, the occasional ink smudge, gave it an authenticity that a polished email or typed letter would have lacked. Was it genuine, or was Nathan simply telling me what he thought I wanted to hear? After 40 years as an accountant specializing in fraud detection, I developed a fairly reliable instinct for distinguishing genuineness from performance. This letter felt real, imperfect, uncomfortable, vulnerable in a way that Nathan had rarely allowed himself to be. Still, one letter didn't erase years of deception. True change would require consistent actions over time, not just words, no matter how seemingly heartfelt. I carefully folded the letter and placed it in my desk drawer, unsure whether I would respond. Life settled into a new rhythm over the following months. My volunteer work at the community center expanded to include a weekly workshop on financial literacy and fraud prevention for seniors. I found unexpected fulfillment in helping others protect themselves from the kind of betrayal I had experienced. The community knew me as the quiet man on the third floor who always greeted neighbors cordially but maintained a respectful privacy. Some elderly neighbors asked for my help reviewing their finances or interpreting confusing bank documents. Assistance I provided for free because I'd learned that purpose comes not from accumulation, but from contribution. As for Nathan, I continued to follow his progress through the quarterly reports his therapist sent, as required by our agreement. I had no direct contact with him since receiving that first letter, maintaining the distance specified in the restorative justice agreement. 6 months after the initial incident, a second letter arrived. This one properly channeled through our respective attorneys as stipulated in our agreement. It was longer than the first, more reflective, less focused on apology, and more on Nathan's own journey of self-discovery. The hardest part, he wrote, has been facing the person I had become. Each counseling session peels back another layer of self-deception. I didn't just steal your money, Dad. I stole your dignity, your security, and the trust you spent 36 years building. I don't know if I can ever repair that, but I'm trying to become a person capable of trying. He described his continued work with fraud victims and how hearing their stories had shown him his own crime from a perspective he had never considered. He mentioned that Brenda had moved out, but they were still technically married, both attending individual and couples counseling to determine if their relationship could be salvaged. The facade we built together is gone now, he wrote. We're trying to discover if there's anything real beneath the surface. Either way, I'm committed to continuing therapy even after it's no longer required by the agreement. This isn't just about fulfilling legal obligations. It's about becoming someone I can respect when I look in the mirror. I didn't respond to this letter either, though I kept it alongside the first in my desk drawer. Something in me wasn't ready. Not because I sought to punish Nathan indefinitely, but because I needed to be certain that the changes he described were genuine and lasting. A year after Nathan's theft, Michael and I were having our regular Friday dinner when he asked the question I'd been pondering myself. Have you thought about seeing him, Nathan, I mean? It's been a year. The formal no-contact period in your agreement ends next month. I set down my fork, considering the question carefully. I've thought about it. I'm just not sure what purpose it would serve. Closure, perhaps, a chance to see for yourself whether the change he writes about is real. Maybe, I conceded, but I'm concerned about creating false expectations. Nathan might see a meeting as implicit forgiveness or a return to our previous relationship. I'm not sure I'm there yet. Michael nodded thoughtfully. Fair enough, there's no rush. The ball is in your court. The conversation moved on to other topics, but Michael's question lingered in my mind. Was I avoiding contact with Nathan out of caution or out of fear? fear of disappointment if his transformation proved superficial, fear of confronting the complicated emotions that still swirled within me, love for my son tangled with the pain of his betrayal. A week later, the third letter arrived, again through proper channels. It was different from the previous two, more measured, less emotional, but somehow more authentic. Nathan described his continued volunteer work with fraud victims, now expanding beyond his required community service hours. He'd been promoted to supervisor at the warehouse, a position he'd earned through consistent work ethic rather than charm or connections. He and Brenda had finalized their divorce, a process he described as painful but necessary for both of us. I've started writing about my experience, he shared, not for publication or attention, but as a way to process what happened and potentially help others avoid my mistakes. My therapist thinks it might eventually serve as a warning to people heading down the same path of prioritizing appearances over integrity. The letter concluded differently from the others. I'm not writing to you expecting a response, Dad. I'm writing because my therapist says part of my recovery is maintaining honesty with you about my progress, regardless of whether you ever decide to communicate with me. If you never do, I will understand and respect that. Your most important lesson was teaching me that consequences can be permanent. I am learning to live with that. This letter joined the others in my drawer. I read them occasionally looking for inconsistencies, contradictions, anything that might suggest Nathan was simply going through the motions rather than experiencing genuine change. But with each letter, the voice seemed increasingly authentic. The voice of a man grappling with his failures and working to rebuild himself from the foundation up. 18 months after the theft, I received an unexpected call from Rebecca Winters, the program coordinator at the Financial Fraud Victims Association, where Nathan had been performing his community service. Mr. Warren, my name is Rebecca Winters. I hope you don't mind me contacting you. I got your number from Nathan's file. Not at all, I replied, curious about the purpose of her call. How can I help you? Actually, I'm calling about your son. His required community service hours ended 3 months ago, but he's continued volunteering with us twice a week. He's been instrumental in developing our new education program for seniors. This was news to me. Nathan's reports had mentioned continued volunteering, but not the extent of his involvement. I'm glad to hear he's been helpful, I said carefully. More than helpful, Mr. Warren. He's become one of our most valuable volunteers. His background in marketing has helped us create materials that actually reach our target audience and his personal experience. She paused. Well, Nathan has shared his story with several of our support groups. His honesty about what he did to you and the consequences he faced has had a powerful impact on both victims and other reform perpetrators. I found myself unexpectedly moved by this information. I wasn't aware he was speaking about his experience publicly. He was reluctant at first, Rebecca explained, but we had a group session where victims expressed feeling helpless because they couldn't understand the mindset of those who had defrauded them. Nathan offered to share his perspective, what he was thinking when he committed his crime, how he justified it to himself, the wake-up call of being held accountable. It was remarkably vulnerable. Since then, he's spoken to several groups, always emphasizing that his actions were inexcusable, regardless of his rationalizations. After ending the call, I sat in my living room for a long time processing what I'd learned. Nathan wasn't just checking boxes to fulfill his legal obligations. He was actively using his painful experience to help others, placing himself in the vulnerable position of publicly acknowledging his wrongdoing. 2 years to the day after I had discovered Nathan's theft, Michael invited me to dinner at his home. When I arrived, I found a more formal setting than our usual casual meals. The dining room table set with his best dishes, wine glasses polished to a sparkle. "What's the occasion?" I asked as he handed me a glass of wine. 2 years, he said simply. 2 years since you made one of the hardest decisions of your life. I thought it deserved acknowledgement. I was touched by his thoughtfulness. Throughout the most difficult period of my life, Michael had been a steady presence, never pushing, never judging, simply supporting whatever I needed at the moment. "Thank you," I said, "not just for this, but for everything." As we enjoyed the excellent meal Michael had prepared, our conversation meandered through various topics before eventually circling back to Nathan. "His 2-year review hearing is next week," I mentioned. "If the judge is satisfied with his progress, the charges will be dismissed permanently." "Will you attend?" I nodded. I've been subpoenaed as a witness to confirm that the restitution has been completed and that Nathan has complied with all aspects of our agreement. And has he complied with everything? To the letter and beyond, I acknowledged. The financial restitution was completed 6 months ago. His counseling reports show consistent attendance and meaningful engagement. His community service hours were fulfilled and then exceeded voluntarily. By all objective measures, he's done everything required of him and more. Michael studied me over the rim of his wineglass. Yet you still haven't seen him. It wasn't an accusation, merely an observation, but it made me uncomfortable nonetheless. No, I haven't. May I ask why? I sighed, searching for words to explain something I wasn't sure I fully understood myself. I suppose I'm waiting to be certain that the change is real and permanent. Nathan spent years creating a facade of success while making increasingly unethical choices. How do I know this isn't just another performance? A more sophisticated one designed to earn back my trust. You don't, Michael said simply. You can't know with absolute certainty. At some point it becomes a leap of faith. Faith has never been my strong suit, I admitted. I've always trusted evidence, numbers, concrete proof. Michael leaned forward, his expression serious. Thomas, I respect your caution. After what happened, it's entirely justified. But I want to offer a perspective as someone who's observed this situation from the outside. He paused, choosing his words carefully. Sometimes in our determination to avoid being fooled again, we can miss genuine transformation when it occurs. 2 years is a significant amount of time for someone to demonstrate change through consistent actions. His words struck a chord, though not necessarily a comfortable one. Had I been so focused on protecting myself from further hurt that I'd become blind to the possibility of genuine redemption? I'm not saying you should immediately welcome Nathan back into your life with open arms, Michael continued. Trust once broken so profoundly takes time to rebuild. But perhaps it's worth considering whether the door should remain closed indefinitely. I nodded, acknowledging the wisdom in his perspective. I'll think about it. The following week, I found myself in a courtroom for Nathan's final review hearing. I had arranged with the court to enter through a private entrance, allowing me to avoid any unexpected encounters with my son. I would provide my testimony and then leave. Clinical, procedural, emotionless. When Nathan entered the courtroom with his attorney, I saw him for the first time in 2 years. The physical changes were subtle but noticeable. He had lost weight and his formerly styled hair was cut in a simpler, more practical fashion. Gone was the designer suit, replaced by a modest but clean button-down shirt and khakis. But the most striking difference was in his demeanor. The performative confidence replaced by a quieter dignity I hadn't seen in him since childhood. He didn't notice me at first, seated toward the back of the courtroom. When he did, our eyes met briefly across the room. He gave a small, respectful nod. No dramatic gestures, no attempt to approach. Just simple acknowledgement of my presence before turning his attention back to his attorney. The hearing proceeded efficiently. The judge reviewed reports from Nathan's counselor, the community service coordinator, and the financial restitution records. When it was my turn to testify, I confirmed that all financial obligations had been met and that Nathan had complied with the no-contact provision of our agreement. And are you satisfied with the outcome of this restorative justice agreement, Mr. Warren? The judge asked. It was a simple question with a complex answer. Was I satisfied the money had been returned? Nathan had completed his required counseling and community service. By all objective measures, the agreement had accomplished its intended purpose. Yes, Your Honor, I said finally. The terms of the agreement have been fulfilled completely. The judge nodded, then turned to Nathan. Mr. Warren, you have complied with all requirements set forth in this agreement. Your counselor reports significant progress in addressing the underlying issues that led to your actions. The victim, your father, has confirmed full restitution. Therefore, in accordance with the terms of the agreement, the charges against you are hereby dismissed. She leaned forward slightly, her expression serious. I want to emphasize, however, that this dismissal does not erase what happened. It simply recognizes that you have taken appropriate steps toward making amends and reducing the likelihood of reoffending. The true measure of your rehabilitation will be your actions going forward. I understand, Your Honor, Nathan replied, his voice steady and respectful. Thank you for this opportunity. As the hearing concluded, I slipped out through the same private entrance, I had used to arrive avoiding any potential interaction with Nathan. I wasn't ready for that yet, despite Michael's gentle prodding and the evidence of change I had witnessed with my own eyes. That evening, as I sat alone in my apartment, I pulled out the 3 letters Nathan had sent over the past 2 years and read them again in sequence. I could trace an evolution in them, from the raw, emotional first letter to the more reflective second one to the acceptance and resolve of the third. They told the story of a man coming to terms with his failures and working to build something better from the wreckage of his mistakes. The question that had haunted me for 2 years remained, was it enough? Could I trust the son who had betrayed me so completely? Not just with money, that was the least of it, but with the father-son bond that should have been sacred. 3 days after the hearing, I received a 4th letter. Unlike the others, this one came directly to my apartment, the formal no-contact period having ended with the judge's ruling. Dear Dad, I saw you at the hearing, though we didn't speak. First, I want to thank you for confirming to the judge that I fulfilled the terms of our agreement. Your testimony helped give me a second chance I'm determined to deserve. I'm writing not to ask for anything, but to share some news and reflections now that the formal legal process has concluded. I've been offered a full-time position at the Financial Fraud Victims Association where I completed my community service. The role involves developing educational programs and speaking to groups about fraud prevention. The salary is modest compared to my previous career, but the work has meaning that marketing luxury products never did. Brenda and I have finalized our divorce amicably. The experience has been painful but clarifying for both of us. She's returned to school to become a teacher, something she'd always wanted to do before getting caught up in our mutual pursuit of status. We occasionally check in with each other, and I'm genuinely happy that she's finding her authentic path. As for me, I've moved to a small apartment near the FFVA office. It's nothing like the house we had before, but it suits my simpler lifestyle now. I continue with therapy weekly, not because it's required, but because it helps me maintain perspective on what truly matters. I won't pretend the past 2 years have been easy. There have been moments of deep shame, financial struggle, and loneliness, but these challenges have stripped away the facade I spent years constructing, revealing the person I actually am rather than the one I pretended to be. For perhaps the first time in my adult life, I'm not performing, for colleagues, for friends, for anyone. This authenticity, however humbling, has been strangely liberating. I want you to know that I don't expect our relationship to return to what it was before. Trust once broken may never be fully restored. If you decide that maintaining distance is best for you, I will understand and respect your choice completely. You've already shown me more grace than I deserved by giving me the opportunity to face consequences in a way that allowed for rehabilitation rather than mere punishment. If, however, there comes a time when you might consider having a cup of coffee together, just to talk with no expectations or obligations, I would welcome that opportunity. Whether that time comes next month, next year, or never at all is entirely your decision, and I will honor whatever you choose. Regardless of what happens between us going forward, I want to thank you for the most difficult lesson you ever taught me, that true character is revealed not by success but by how we respond to failure. It took losing everything I thought mattered to discover what actually does. With respect and gratitude, Nathan. I folded the letter carefully and added it to the others in my desk drawer. This one, like the third, didn't ask for forgiveness or seek reconciliation. It simply reported Nathan's current circumstances and acknowledged that the choice to reestablish contact remained entirely mine. The weeks following the hearing brought an unexpected peace. The legal process was complete. My financial situation was secure once more. The painful question of what to do about Nathan no longer required immediate action. I could take as much time as I needed to decide if and when I wanted to reestablish contact. 3 months after the hearing, I was leaving the community center after my weekly fraud prevention workshop when I ran into Rebecca Winters, the coordinator from the Financial Fraud Victims Association, who had called me about Nathan's volunteer work. "Mr. Warren? What a pleasant surprise," she greeted me warmly. "I didn't realize you volunteered here." "Every Wednesday," I confirmed. "Financial literacy workshops for seniors. And please call me Thomas." "Thomas, then. I'm actually here to discuss a potential collaboration between our organizations. The director mentioned you might be the perfect person to help develop a joint program on fraud prevention." We decided to continue the conversation over coffee at a nearby cafe. As we discussed the potential program, Rebecca occasionally mentioned Nathan's work at the FFVA, always in a professional context rather than personal. He's developed an effective presentation for seniors that explains how fraudsters target them emotionally. She shared. The feedback has been overwhelmingly positive. Participants say it's helpful to understand the psychology behind these scams. I'm glad his marketing background is being put to good use, I said carefully. Rebecca studied me for a moment. May I speak candidly, Thomas? I nodded, curious. I know the history between you and Nathan. He's been very open about it. It forms the foundation of his work with us. What I want you to know is that in my 15 years working with offenders in financial crimes, I've rarely seen someone demonstrate such genuine commitment to making amends and preventing others from making similar mistakes. She paused, seeming to consider her next words carefully. His transformation appears to be sincere and sustained. Appears to be, I repeated quietly. She smiled gently. As professionals who work with fraud, we both know appearances can be deceiving. But I also believe that at some point, consistent behavior over time becomes character. Whatever you decide regarding your personal relationship with Nathan, I wanted you to know that from a professional perspective, his work is making a genuine difference in people's lives. Her words stayed with me long after our meeting. I had been waiting for absolute certainty that Nathan's transformation was real, a standard that might be impossible to meet. Perhaps the question wasn't whether I could be 100% sure of his sincerity, but whether there was enough evidence to justify taking a small step forward. That evening, I pulled out the 4 letters again, reading them in sequence. Then I took out a piece of paper and began to write my own letter, the first direct communication I would initiate with my son in over 2 years. Nathan, thank you for your recent letter and for respecting the boundaries that were necessary during the past 2 years. I've been following your progress through various channels and have noted the consistent effort you've made to fulfill and exceed the requirements of our agreement. I met with Rebecca Winters today to discuss a collaboration between the community center where I volunteer and the FFVA. She spoke highly of your work there. It seems you've found a way to use your experience and skills to benefit others, which is commendable. You mentioned the possibility of meeting for coffee sometime. I'm not ready for regular contact yet, but I would be open to a short meeting at the cafe in Riverside Park next Saturday at 10 a.m. if that works for your schedule. No pressure either way. Sincerely, Dad. It was brief and cautious, offering neither absolution nor rejection, just an opportunity for a first small step. I mailed it the next morning, uncertain whether it was the right decision, but knowing I couldn't determine the path forward without at least one face-to-face conversation. Saturday arrived with clear skies and mild temperatures. Perfect weather for an outdoor cafe meeting. I arrived 15 minutes early, selecting a table with a view of the park's walking path. Nathan arrived precisely at 10, dressed casually in jeans and a simple button-down shirt. He spotted me immediately but approached slowly, almost hesitantly. "Thank you for coming," he said as he reached the table. "Is it okay if I sit?" I gestured to the chair across from me. "Please." An awkward silence settled between us as Nathan took his seat. 2 years of separation had created a chasm that wouldn't be easily bridged. "I ordered black coffee for myself," I said finally. "Would you like something?" "Black coffee would be fine for me too," he replied. "Some things don't change." I raised my hand to signal the server, who quickly took Nathan's order and disappeared. "You look well," Nathan offered tentatively. "I am," I confirmed. "My volunteer work at the community center has been fulfilling. And you, better than I deserve to be," he said quietly. "The job at the FFVA is challenging but meaningful. It's not what I ever pictured myself doing, but it suits who I am now." The server returned with Nathan's coffee, providing a momentary reprieve from the tension. As Nathan added a small amount of sugar to his cup, a habit he'd had since college, I was struck by the strange familiarity of the gesture. This was my son, the boy I had raised, and yet he was also in many ways a stranger. "I want to thank you," Nathan said after taking a sip of his coffee. "Not just for meeting me today, but for what you did 2 years ago." "Reporting you to the police?" I asked, somewhat surprised. He nodded. "It was the wake-up call I needed. If you had bailed me out, protected me from consequences as I expected, I would have continued down the same path until I destroyed myself completely." "It wasn't an easy decision," I admitted. "The right ones rarely are." Nathan set down his cup carefully. Dad, I don't expect forgiveness or for things to go back to how they were. What I did violated the foundation of our relationship in a fundamental way. I just want you to know that I understand now why you did what you did, and I'm grateful for it, as painful as it was. I studied my son's face, the face I had known for 38 years. The superficial charm that had characterized him in recent years was gone, replaced by something more genuine, more grounded. Nathan, I need to ask you something, and I need complete honesty. Anything, he responded immediately. Was it worth it? Not the money itself, but what it cost you, your marriage, your career, your reputation, our relationship. If you could go back, knowing what you know now, would you make the same choice? Nathan didn't answer immediately. He looked out over the park, seemingly gathering his thoughts before meeting my gaze directly. No, he said finally. Not because of the external consequences, though those have been significant, but because I've come to understand what I was really sacrificing. My integrity, my authentic self-relationships based on truth rather than performance. I thought I needed the trappings of success to be valued, to be worthy. I was wrong, and that mistake cost me the things that actually matter. He paused, including you. The simple honesty of his response touched something in me that had been frozen for 2 years. Not enough to erase the past, but perhaps enough to consider the possibility of a future, different from before, built on a more honest foundation. I don't know what comes next for us, Nathan, I said truthfully. Trust takes time to rebuild, if it can be rebuilt at all. I understand it, he replied. I'm not asking for more than you're ready to give. This conversation is already more than I expected. We talked for another hour, carefully at first, then with increasing ease. Nathan shared more about his work at the FFVA, his continued therapy, the small community of friends he had built, who knew his full story and accepted him anyway. I told him about my volunteer work, my friendship with Michael, the unexpected sense of purpose I had found in helping others avoid the kind of betrayal I had experienced. As our meeting drew to a close, Nathan asked hesitantly, would it be okay if we did this again sometime? No pressure, and whatever timeline works for you. I considered the question carefully. This single meeting hadn't erased the past, but it had shown me a version of my son that I hadn't seen in many years. Perhaps the authentic Nathan who had been buried beneath layers of performance and pretense. I think that would be okay, I said finally. Perhaps in a few weeks. The relief and gratitude on Nathan's face was evident, though he kept his response measured. Thank you. That means a lot to me. As we stood to leave, there was an awkward moment. Should we shake hands? Hug, simply nod, goodbye. Nathan resolved it by extending his hand formally, respecting the boundaries that still existed between us. Thank you for meeting me today, Dad. I appreciate the opportunity more than I can express. I took his hand, feeling the familiar shape of it in mine. The same hand I had once held as we crossed streets when he was small, the same hand I had shaken in congratulations at his college graduation. Take care of yourself, Nathan. Walking home, I felt neither triumph nor defeat, only the quiet certainty that this difficult chapter, however painful, had been necessary for both of us. For Nathan, it had stripped away the facade he had constructed and forced him to confront his true self. For me, it had tested my principles and shown me that true love sometimes means allowing those we care about to face the consequences of their actions. Perhaps one day, after more coffee meetings and continued evidence of change, there might be a path toward a rebuilt relationship. Different from before, stronger in some ways because it would be based on reality rather than illusion. But for now, I was content with this small beginning, a tentative bridge across the chasm that had separated father and son. As I reached my apartment building, I found myself reflecting on what I would say if someone asked me what I had learned from this painful journey. I think I would tell them this. Sometimes the hardest lessons are the ones we need most desperately to learn. And sometimes the most profound act of love a parent can offer is the gift of accountability. Painful in the moment, but ultimately the foundation upon which a stronger character can be built. True justice is not always swift or clean, but when it is genuine, it transforms not only the guilty, but also the one who was wrong, teaching us both who we really are when all illusions fall away. In the end, that transformation, difficult and painful though it may be, is the most valuable legacy a father can leave his son.